Hi, and welcome to CCDTV. Here, we're doing a series of interviews with local filmmakers right here in the Waterloo region. Today, we're talking with Sara Geidlinger. Sara, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be here.
We are honored to have you here. But before we get into your film, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, I am a Waterloo region local. I've lived here my entire life, worked here my entire life. I am a podcaster and a photographer. And at some point, I decided to take those two things and mix them together to start making films.
Describe your journey into working as a creative.
Oh, that is, how does anyone answer that question?
We've got the time, so.
Okay, good. That's a great question. I'm not sure if I would wish the arts on anyone, but when you're in it, it's usually passion driven.
Yes.
And detail-oriented, focus-driven.
Yeah.
I have always been a creative. From the time I was a little kid, I would make my own toys. I was very interested in art. I had an aunt who would always buy me art supplies. I would paint, I would draw, I would sing. I would unpack boxes and build things out of them. And it wasn't until grade 10 in high school, I went to Resurrection at the time, and first class. We were the first class to go through. That's, you can do the math, everybody. And Mrs. Jacobassa was my grade 10 graphic arts teacher. It was because it was the first term of kids going through. There was a lot of really experimental courses offered and material offered. So like for tech, you could take shop, or you could take typing, or you could take kite design and building. And I was like, well, I'm obviously going to be building a kite.
Yeah, obviously.
Why wouldn't I build a kite, right? So our graphic arts teacher, she was amazing, and she offered so many different things that I had never touched before. And one of those things was photography. And I had my first roll of Ilford film in a 35 millimeter camera. I borrowed my dad's camera at the time. And I shot a roll of film of my nephews in my family backyard, and then I shot a roll of film on a family trip to Key West in Florida. And she taught us how to work the darkroom and how to develop all of our own, film and photos, which is usually, those things are tricky to do, right? And as I think I was telling you this once before, as I was rocking the photographic paper back and forth in the developer tray and seeing my image come alive, I was like, whoa, my gosh, this is what I've been trying to do. Now I know what my art is.
You found your voice.
I found it. And I even at, what are you in grade 10, 16? Even at that time, being so young, I was like, this is it. I'm okay at drawing if I try really hard. I'm okay at painting, but I find it laborious. I'm okay at these things, and I had tried drama and all of these different aspects of art, but rocking that picture back and forth in the darkroom and hanging them up, hearing them drip, I can still remember very clearly that day I had found my medium.
Do you still have any of those photos from back then?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
In your opinion, when you were a full-time photographer, what was your best shot that you ever taken?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I do a lot of family photography because in Waterloo, that's a pretty easeasygoing business. Working with families is always fun, and I love working with kids. But it's always there. That is, family portraiture is never going anywhere, right?
Exactly.
So for me, I have a photo actually I took of a client's family. The parents aren't in it. It's two little girls, and they were trying to make each other smile for the photos. And whatever they said to each other, I didn't hear it, but whatever they said to each other, and they're like maybe 4 and 6, they are belly laughing so hard, right? Like, big, wide faces belly laughing in this photo, and one of them's doubled over laughing, and that's my favorite photo that I've ever taken. It was just one moment catching them having this little exchange, and that's the one that the family framed and put in their house.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What's a photo that exists of you?
Yes.
Which one of those best describe you as a person, do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. My daughters have taken a photo of me asleep on the couch with that that sleeping face, and they printed it out and hung it up everywhere. That was a moment I think that they would best describe me as. But there's a photo of me as a little child in a Wonder Woman bathing suit with a beach towel,
Yeah.
running through a campsite, and I think that I'm still that person.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm still that playful person.
The reason I ask that is just because, in my own opinion, when you're a photographer, as much as you're telling other people's stories with one frame, you're also putting pieces of yourself in that frame as well. So, yeah. So describe that actually, the transition from photographer to podcaster and filmmaker.
Right. So my creative partner, Marshall Ward, who's a longtime artist, educator, and writer for a column in the Waterloo Chronicle for about 20 years, Rockseller Magazine, Slam Magazine, a bunch of publications. Sadly left us in December of 23. He passed away, but we worked on this podcast together, Bond Park. And we had met at Bond Park in Waterloo while we were work-at-home, stay-at-home parents. And
You were neighbors.
we were
though,
neighbors,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We just met while we would take our kids to this local park and, talk the day away. And
Right.
instead of talking about parenting and feeding schedules and sleeping, we talked about art and culture and movies and books. And we would always crave each other's attention at the park because when you're a parent to small children working at home, it's very isolating. And it's always nice to be able to talk to somebody about something other than your day-to-day life.
Exactly.
Yeah, so so Marshall and I created the podcast. We started recording in 2019, and we had run into each other that summer and talked on the sidewalk for about 3 hours. We hadn't seen each other in a while. And after that 3-hour conversation, we decided that we wanted to make a show out of it. He'd been interested in podcasting, and I had been obsessed with it since finding audiobooks. And then I forayed into podcasts, and I thought, it can't be that hard to make this. We can figure
Right.
this out. There's YouTube. We'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we made what would eventually become a hyper-local Waterloo region-focused podcast that went on to win some awards locally, and we're really proud of that. Skip ahead a few years, Marshall wrote a column about Robbie De Silva, who owns 3D Vintage Toys, Stuff and Things at the St. Jacobs Farmers Market in Waterloo. And this column really focused on how people are transported in time when they find a favorite toy in Rob's vintage shop. So that could be their toy soldiers or their strawberry shortcake, their Care Bear, their Transformers, or what else was there? Power Rangers, so many different things. So Robbie was really enamored and taken, aback by this joy that he gets to provide collectors with their favorite items at a reasonable price, right? Which is a big thing to him. But also, just get to watch them as they're transported, as they pick up this toy and they're stuck in this sort of mesmerized nostalgia and recollection of things of their youth. And I said to Marshall, man, you really crushed this. Like, it would be so cool to make a documentary and talk to all of these people about their experiences. And Marshall just said, why don't you? And I said, I don't make films. Like, I make pictures and I make podcasts. He's like, it's the same thing. Just put them together. You'll figure it out. You always figure things out. And we did. So I applied for a Regional Waterloo Arts grant, and I received $5,500 to make Playtime the movie. And that paid for supplies and time and software and holding a premiere. And it was my first filmmaking experience, and I'm very proud of it. It's
You should be. I watched it, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. It's important to note that I made the film that I could with the tools that I had.
Right.
So I had one Canon 5D Mark IV, a couple of lenses, I had photography lights, modeling lamps specifically, and a backdrop stand. And I made this creative decision to have a colored background in front of the speakers, and the color choices behind them were really intentional as well.
It really adds to the whimsical feeling of the movie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad
That's
you say that, because there were mixed feelings about it. Some people said it took them out of the story, and some people said that it felt creative and playful. But I really just wanted something that looked pretty.
Yes.
And in the first cut of the movie, I had a rule, which was if it wasn't filmed by me, it's not going in the film. And then I went through after about a year and made a second cut, and I included some commercials from the 70s and 80s and some little clips of cartoons, because I thought they would help round out the story. And that was actually a big comment from some of the community members, that they wanted to see more content like that. Yeah, so I made the film that I could with the tool. I'll see now, I'm seeing Robbie's got you can see the lamps in his light, in his glasses. And I almost cut that piece because I thought, well, that's so unprofessional. I don't know how to light a film. What am I doing? You're as a creative, you're grappling with these with these technical aspects if you haven't been properly trained. And then I watched like Martin Scorsese's masterclass, and the whole thing through, he's got the 2 lights in his glasses, and I thought, okay, I can't be that wrong. I've got this.
Mistakes are commonplace in this industry.
Totally.
And it's just up to us to find a way to get the viewer distracted from it. And I think you found a good way to do it by having such meaningful content.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying so.
Yeah.
The film really speaks to me, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead in your questions or not, but I set out to make a cute and lovely film about our connection to toys from our youth.
Right.
And I had no idea that we would uncover this real underlying theme of mental wellness.
Yes.
And why people collect, and why it's important to them to revisit their youth.
And so that does kind of get into my next question. Let's go over some of the themes that you weren't really prepared to unpack yet. Yeah, what were some of the things that you found?
Well, first of all, when I applied for the grant and we went and told Robbie the news that we had gotten the funding and asked if he was still in, I had no idea that he had this day job as a counselor for at-risk youth. He was an overnight counselor for a home for at-risk youth, and I had no idea that that was his day job, and that this shop was like a favorite pastime and more of a hobby and more of a way for him to build his own collection and meet other collectors, more of a social venture for him than for his revenue, for his income. So that started there.
Yeah.
And then Robbie is responsible and deserves credit for connecting us with every single person in the film. He brought all of these collectors to us. And we met over the course of a few weeks and did all the filming. And here's the stories again, right? Luis, who collects My Little Ponies, specifically first generation My Little Ponies, not a brony, as he will outline in our interview. That's a different type of collector. He as a child, he wasn't allowed to collect My Little Ponies because his parents thought that it was very feminine, and they didn't want him to, in his words, turn out gay. They just didn't want that for him. But now he's got this collection of thousands of My Little Ponies that brings him so much joy.
Yeah, it's crazy how like a piece of plastic can bring so much contention and joy at the same time.
At the same time. And he's rectifying and reconciling that relationship with the toys in his adulthood now with his money from the job that he works. So, forcing children not to play with certain toys is probably not going to work out in your favor. We live and work and exist and raise families in a place where we're fortunate enough to have disposable income to get them toys or have access to toys. There's great programs at our public libraries where you can borrow toys as well. And really, as Cindy Perry outlines, you should encourage your kids to play with whatever sparks them joy.
Exactly.
No matter what, if it's from the blue aisle or the pink aisle,
I think one of the things that like really stood out to me was one of the gentlemen in the film. He was on the younger side, but he was already buying and selling toys. Jacob, yes. When he said like what he did as a job to his friends, his peers, they gave him like funny looks and just kind of told him it's kind of a weird job to have. But in my mind, I'm thinking like, where do you think toys came from before? Before Toys R Us, before Walmart. Toy dealers, family owned.
Small shops.
That's where it came from, and like that just speaks on another level of like something that capitalism has taken away from identity. And that's just something I found interesting in the film.
Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there is, without outwardly spelling it out for the viewer, there is another underlying theme of reducing and reusing these items, right? We're going back into maybe the thrifts or the Goodwill or Value Village or wherever that might be, and to toy collectors like Jacob Chakeen and to toy shows, and we're finding these older items to be reused. So this idea of perhaps digging up the family cache of old toys, or going to the thrift to find something, or these toy shows, or going to a collector. We are not ordering and shipping another plastic item from the internet. We are, reusing what we already have.
Exactly.
And I think that that's a really important theme as we move forward, because this overconsumption of mass amounts of plastics isn't sustainable, as we all know.
Yes. Speaking on that, Me and my brother were collectors of sorts. My brother is collecting at the moment old video games.
Nice.
And my collection here is
Yeah.
of plastic soldiers. And this is a piece I actually made when I was younger. I stripped all the fabric from twist ties, and I just made a figure like that. Probably have like over 100 of these at home, just sitting in my...
Really? Of
Yeah.
the made ones?
Yeah, I've made ones, yeah.
Oh, that's impressive. May I pick it up?
Yes, of course,
Okay,
yeah.
what I'm really impressed with is the design of the feet.
Yes.
Because you would have tried multiple things before you realized that you needed this sort of bird pattern,
Yeah.
this webbed foot to make them stand up.
Yeah.
Right?
It was lots of trial and error, and
And this is gum or cigarette or chocolate packs,
those
tinfoil.
tinfoil
Yeah.
from those chocolates that
Oh,
the
yeah.
dollar chocolates, yeah.
Yep.
And just some cardboard. So
It's amazing. And I don't know if you can see this or pick it up later, but the detail on this sword, it's pretty fantastic.
part of me thinks that if I kept up with it, then I could have maybe sold a few on the side. But
Well, you know, it's never too late
Yeah.
to follow passions, right? Or to
Exactly.
change direction.
exactly.
Maybe you'll be dealing in wire toys in the future,
Perhaps, yeah.
perhaps.
There's something else that I did want to bring up about the film. So the film is about collecting, and some of the themes that we talked about were just overcoming some trauma, and that's how people find their comfort with collecting. I did watch some documentaries actually that kind of tackled the issue from the other side, talking about the negative aspects of collecting. What would you say about that?
Oh, this is such a good question because even when I was being interviewed for media leading up to our private screenings of Playtime at the Princess Cinema in Waterloo, people were going for that angle. They wanted me to say, oh, these are some quirky characters who've got a real hoarding issue. Like, that's not the truth. The truth is these are lovely individuals who find joy in the art of collecting, so going out on the weekends and picking in the wild, as they call it. So that might be going to the thrift or going to garage sales or whatever that might be, or going to the toy collector shows, but also meeting up with other people who are collectors.
Right.
Just like any other family might be a hockey family or a baseball family or a dance family, they're toy families, and this is what they do. And some of them play with their collections, and some of them display them in these beautiful cases in their homes, and you can see different examples of that in the movie. Oh, look at Robbie playing with Alf, of all things, Alf. You know, and I've seen some pretty intense, let's say, because we're in Canada, hockey families.
Sure.
Right? I'm not judging them for their weekend activities. Toys are no different. This is what gets them out on the weekend. This is what you know. Robbie actually says in one portion of the movie, the parents sometimes come up to him and say, "Oh, thank you, you got my teenager out of bed, and we all got to go to the market as a family," instead of having them sleep through it again because they knew they could come to your stand and get a toy, something for their collection, right? And I think it's more stories of beauty and joy than it is of trying to find some dark underbelly of the toy collecting world. You know?
I think like the craziest thing about that argument is no one will lift a finger when they're talking about their baseball card collection. Adults collect cars, and it's just when something is outside of society's norms.
Yeah, or when it's connected to childhood. People think that things connected to childhood are childish, and that we should really abandon them as we grow up. And I say, why? You know, 2 nights ago, I went tobogganing with a crazy carpet. Are you familiar with the crazy carpet?
Yeah.
For anyone who's not, it's a very thin piece of plastic, just kind of person wide enough with 2 handles on it, and one side is very slippery. And you get on top of this at the top of a snowy hill, and you plummet to your certain doom at the bottom of the hill. And I'm, 47 years old, and I just thought, I am going tobogganing. I feel like it. They're sledding, I guess. This is going to be fun. And I went for it. And, is anybody going to judge me for that? It's no different than going skating or skiing.
Exactly.
I felt like having some joy and hurtling down a slippery hill of snow, so I did. So why is toy collecting any different than that? This is bringing people joy. People collect DVDs still.
Comic books.
Books. Junk from home decor stores that say live, laugh, love on them. No offense to anyone that likes that stuff, but everyone collects things. We all amass things with these disposable incomes. And what's wrong with collecting toys that bring you joy.
It was just really nice to get views from both sides of the spectrum,
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure.
Let's get back to the filmmaking aspect.
Sure.
So, what was we talked about a little bit already, but let's reemphasize. What was the hardest part about getting this film made?
I think it's editing.
Yeah.
Honestly, well, getting up and going, like understanding that it was okay that I dive into making a film with just what I had to use. So again, just to get back to the technical perspective, I used a Canon 5D Mark IV. I had a couple of lenses, a tripod, a few lights, a backdrop stand where I could put these paper rolls, these backdrops up, and I have a Rode shotgun mic and an H4n Zoom recorder. And I had to like manually sync the audio and video together in post, and you know, really getting started, accepting and being forgiving that these are the tools that I have, and here's the thing I'm going to make, and hopefully people will show up and care,
Right.
you know, and hopefully it will resonate with viewers. And I really wanted the folks involved to feel like a sense of pride about the film and feel like their stories were being honored as well. So that was important to me. But the editing was new for me. So this was my second film was this my first film? Just a second. What was the timeline on that? This was actually my second film.
Okay.
I had made an earlier film for a local nonprofit all about their the work that they do. That was a 60-minute film. But this one was one that I had full creative control about. That one was more about archival information and how they got to where they are. So the editing process really was a learning experience for me. I dove into Final Cut. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I got books from the library about how to create a film in a digital sense, which I had not done before.
Right.
I think 2 weeks before the private screening at the Princess Theater, I had my final version, which was about 5 hours long. So I really needed to shave that down. But it's like, I think there's this filmmaking phrase called killing your darlings. Have you heard that before? Where you have to, even though these moments, like you want to include all of them, you have to at some point get really selective and chop things that you don't really want to chop because you're so connected to the material.
Every creative's nightmare, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you have an exhibition of photographs or paintings and you can't include them all, right? You have to sort of kill these darlings is the phrase. And that was a really hard thing for me to do because I wanted Luis to talk about every pony that he showed us because he is so passionate about his collection. He knows the names of all of these ponies. I even have a tiny clip in here where he says, "Oh, sorry, I just got confused. They all have names." You know, like he was giving us a moment to understand that each one of these little toys is so important to him. So it was hard to cut his 2.5 hour long interview down to just, at the end of it, he's probably in the film for about 3 minutes total, right? So the editing process and the culling process of information was the hardest part. And technically, like understanding how the software works and keeping organized, that was a real learning experience for me.
What's one thing you would change if you had the chance to do it all again?
Ooh, that's such a good question. If I had the chance to do it all again, I think I would borrow a second camera or rent a second camera, perhaps from the Kitchener Public Library because they have that service in their Commons studio. And I would be a little more forgiving with the content. I really labored over. If you look at, and I could give you a clip to include if you want in this interview, but if you look at how playtime is cut, it is tiny little slivers of information. And I was so careful about every little piece. I think I would be a little more forgiving and I would let it run for longer if it needed to. Yeah.
So the final time was like 48 minutes, right?
Something like that,
Okay.
yeah.
That's pretty good for a documentary film for your first go.
It is, yeah. I mean, better than those 5 hours that I started
Yeah,
off
exactly,
with.
exactly.
Yeah, but I also was not aware of run times for festivals. I didn't consider that at all. I think a documentary short is sometimes, it needs to be under 45 minutes, and I didn't realize that. I think it's sitting now at about 46, 47 minutes, and that would be something I would consider, but at the time I was just trying to make a thing, and I hadn't considered what that might mean to be eligible for festivals at the time. Yeah. During the creating of the film, was there anything about yourself that surprised yourself? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's such a good question. one thing I learned with this film specifically that I'm carrying over into the next two films, I'm working on another film about hip hop in Waterloo region and another one all about pro wrestling referees. And what I've carried through from the podcast, Bond Park, but also from Playtime, is that it is very important that I am a facilitator of the story and I'm not feeding anyone my own narrative.
Right.
So when you're asking questions, right, sometimes if you've done a few of these interviews, sometimes if someone isn't being forthcoming, you want to coax them and guide them to an answer, but at the same time you don't want to feed them a line.
You've cracked the code.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to not rush and give people space to tell their stories. Some of these people, there's Jacob with the falcon, that's so good. Some of these stories, and some of these people were more comfortable speaking on camera than others.
Right.
So they were able to come in, sit down in front of the backdrop, boom, 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 get their answers done, and off they would go with their toys. And some it took coaxing, and it took time, and they were a little nervous about how their story would come across. You know, like, did I do okay? And I don't want to sound weird, you know, like those types of things. So really to just be a platform that can spotlight somebody else's story, I think is, for me, what's important about documentary filmmaking. Tons of documentaries are made with a narrative, and you get someone to sign a release, you interview them, and you're building a story. But it's not journalism when you're making a documentary every time. You're building a story to the narrative of the story of the tale that you want to tell.
It's very powerful in a sense.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But it's also very easy to create a dialogue that wasn't actually intended by the speaker.
Yeah.
And so I want to be very careful to honor what they were saying.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so this played at the Princess Cinemas. How did that go?
Oh, it was so great.
Yeah.
So again, this is a testament to my late creative partner, Marshall Ward. Marshall was my marketing machine. He emailed, poor everyone in the Waterloo Region community, he emailed everyone that we had basically ever met. He spoke to people in person. He would take tickets out on his journey, throughout town. And like Marshall was, for our creative partnership, he was really the boots on the ground, community connected and engaged part of our partnership. And I'm more the tech and, the detail-oriented, sitting with the laptop and holding up, if you're editing films or a podcast, you know how much, sweatpants and coffee that takes to get through a project. But Marshall really was our community connector, and he made sure that every seat was filled. And I didn't want to speak before the film because I was far too nervous. And he said, no, this is never going to happen again. This is our one time to show this important film. Everyone who loves us is here. Everyone who supports our work is here. Jacob's family and Drew's family and Robbie's family, they're all here showing up to see this. You need to stand up and say a few words. And I'm glad I did. Looking back now, I'm glad that I did. But yeah, it was Marshall and his relentless connection to community that really filled those seats. And it was a success. I was really proud of it.
Describe that feeling when you're giving that speech, just looking out on the sea of faces with applause. Describe that feeling.
Okay, I'm less nervous now because I've
Yeah.
spoken a few more times now at things like this, but I was sweating. I was nervous. My mouth was dry.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's no moisture left in your mouth, and I'd been podcasting for a while. This was different. I was about, it really felt to me, I use this term, it really felt like showing your underwear, like, here I am, people, like, here's this thing I made, I hope that you like it. So I tried to make a joke because that's in my nature. I said something like, you guys just want me to sing on the microphone? I could sing a song. I think I felt like singing Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, or something like that I had said. I explained that I made a film I could with what I had. I thanked the people I needed to thank. I really gave Robbie credit for bringing this group of individuals together. I explained the process, and I just thanked everyone for coming. And I remember saying that now, but at the time, I might as well
been on autopilot.
Oh, yeah, no clue. And I sat at the very back watching everyone watch the film, and I was nervous the whole time, but it was such a wonderful and meta experience to watch this thing that you've been laboring over. And I go like this because I'm envisioning the cuts in Final Cut.
I understood the...
Okay, so the chops, right? So I'm watching this thing and people are giggling at the right moments and laughing at the right moments, laughing at times that I didn't expect them to. And then there were some quiet moments where I expected a giggle. So I thought, oh, okay, this is something that didn't resonate with the crowd. So
not in the way you thought it would.
Not in the way that I thought that it would. So it was a really positive learning experience for me because I love feedback. I'm not ever offended by feedback. I think that art is subjective and that we're all entitled to our own opinions about it. So I even received a bunch of long emails from people about their thoughts because I asked everyone, please, ruthless feedback. Let me know what you thought. I can take it, you know?
So Marshall was able to see the final cut of the film.
Yes, he was, yeah.
And what did he think?
He was so proud.
Yeah.
He was so proud of this work. And, you know, Marshall, of course, pushed me to do this. He pushed me to apply for university. I'm now a postgrad student at Waterloo studying community music. Or sorry, not at Waterloo. I don't even know where I go. I'm going to say that again. He also pushed me to apply for school, and I'm now a postgrad student in the community music program at Laurier.
Gotcha.
He would often say things like, you know, we've gone as far as we can with our podcast, or we've gone as far as we can with this project. I just want to strap a rocket on your back and see where you take it next, you know. And there aren't a lot of creative partners, I think, that would let somebody grow in that way. But for Marshall, that's what he did for everybody in the community in Waterloo region. And he lifted a lot of people that way. So yeah, he was very, very proud of the final cut. And it's really sad that he won't be able to see the other two movies come together because he was involved in their creation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to my next question. So tell us more about your upcoming projects.
Thank you. So one is called Hip Hop Hope, and that is a documentary film with a focus on John Corbin, who is an educator and hip hop artist. But it's really about the hip hop scene in Waterloo region and what is happening and what it still needs. And I'm really hoping that it draws attention to the need for promoting education in songwriting, beat creation, music production from the grade 7 to 12 level. Marshall was involved in that as well. It was really a conversation between himself and John Corbin that formed the idea of this movie. And it developed out of conversations that we had had. Back in 22, we created a 3-part series on the Mel Brown Music Festival and Symposium, the inaugural festival. And we interviewed, it was a 3-day festival. We interviewed every single artist, and actually Havaya Mighty was fresh off of her Juno win for Best Rap EP, and we interviewed her as well. And conversations after that series and after that festival really led to what's next. Like, this festival is great, but where is the space for this music on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis, you know? It can't just be one festival. And where's the community focus there? So yeah, we partnered with Laurier, Kitchener Public Library, Shirk, and Waterloo Region Community Foundation to create a full-length film all about that idea and what's still needed and what's happening. So I'm really excited to bring that to everyone. I think we're going to see a lot of music we haven't seen before, and I hope it appeals to a wide audience. And the other film is again, quirky. It is called The Ref Didn't See It, and it is all about pro wrestling referees, specifically on the Ontario indie circuit. Pro wrestling is, I don't know if you know, but it's scripted.
Yes.
I think that's more well known now than ever before. And wrestling is actually kind of having a moment. You know, there are a bunch of series on Netflix, and I think actually WWE just made a deal with Netflix to bring some live programming for next year. But
the new film with Zac Efron that also just came out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. The Claw.
Yes,
I think
that's
or the Iron Claw.
I think
the Iron
so.
Claw.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm not a pro wrestling fan, or I should say, I wasn't a pro wrestling fan when I started this process. Marshall and I had another podcast that was lesser known called Unscripted Spectacle Wrestling with Wrestling. And the premise of that was Marshall was a wrestling historian. He's actually quoted in books, and people turn to him when they're writing wrestling. Sorry, how would I say about this?
people turn to Marshall for quotes when they're writing about wrestling.
Yeah.
He had a meticulous and fastidiously organized collection of thousands of wrestling DVDs, and he was a pro. He really knew his stuff. And I knew nothing about wrestling at the time of this show. We've had it for about 2 years. And we would have these pro wrestlers and professionals and journalists and philosophers and, and writers, promoters, all of these different types of people from the wrestling world pop up on our screen on Zoom. And Marshall would obviously know who they were, and I would have no clue. And that's the premise of our show. So I would see somebody would have a mug that said, world's greatest dad. And I would say, so you're a dad, tell me about that. And Marshall would just be shaking his head like, this is Raymond Rougeau. He's wrestled, in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and it was a really good premise because it brought the storytelling of these people's lives to the forefront instead of, what happened last week on SmackDown. That's a thing, SmackDown in wrestling.
Right.
So
you're basically a sponge for all this info.
Exactly. So I really can't claim to be a pro wrestling novice anymore. And, through the making of The Ref Didn't See It, unbeknownst to me, without any autonomy of my own, became a wrestling fan because I'm going to these indie shows. And again, it's just like toy collecting. These are people putting on wrestling shows every weekend. They have day jobs, but they're bringing their kids out, they're bringing their families out, and they're setting up a ring, and they're getting their gear on, and they're putting wrestling shows on every weekend for their communities to enjoy. So we took that one step further and focused on the referee, who is supposed to be invisible. The referee is supposed to be, the rule keeper and the peacemaker in the ring, and be completely invisible. But our movie focuses solely on those characters. Yeah.
We're going to be very excited to see those projects.
Thank you.
And the funny thing is, just like from the way you're describing it, I just love how a lot of filmmakers, they become experts for a very short time on very niche activities and such.
Yeah. I feel like that's true of this. I never thought in a million years I would understand the world of wrestling. And here I am going to shows every weekend and taking that camera out and trying not to get smushed at the side of the ring when wrestlers are thrown over the top rope and I'm ringside trying to film this activity. Yeah.
Bringing the conversation back to locally. So you had the film show at Princess Cinemas.
Yeah.
So why are local theaters and local film festivals like the Grand River Film Festival, why are those so important to us?
That's such a good question. Keeping a focus on local celebration of film is important because we need to know that we can live and work and create in the cities that we live in. Somebody said to me recently that KW, or Waterloo region, doesn't have its own culture, that it's devoid of rich culture. And I thought, well, that for however true that may be, for this one person specifically, I was born and raised and I live and work in Waterloo region. So like it or not, Waterloo region is my culture. I don't have large extended family. My parents are gone, my grandparents are gone. I don't have this storytelling that's passed down from, coming from a different place. I'm about 4th generation Canadian, and our traditions and our food and our celebrations are of the world that we've created here. And so like it or not, this is my culture. So I think it's important to know that, yes, if you create something in Waterloo region, it could be a stepping stone to a festival in Toronto or New York or in LA or wherever, or even in Europe or wherever that might bring you. It's important to know that you can make a living, work, share your creations, and bring others together to celebrate in your community the work that's being done and the people that are living there. That's what Bond Park was, and I hope that's what my films are. And a local film festival like the Grand River Film Festival or the KW Film Fest, those are important to celebrate what we're doing here.
It's always nice to get a chance to shine a spotlight on where you grew up, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And community connection really is everything. You can't do this kind of work at an insular level. You have to reach out to your community, and you have to ask friends to come out to your shows, and you have to, ask people to celebrate it with you.
Exactly. We've talked about your present work. We've talked a little bit about your upcoming work. Now let's fast forward a bit to your future.
Right.
What are some of the projects that you want to do before you retire?
Oh, this is such a good question. What can I talk about? This is such a good question. I want to perhaps revisit some of the guests that I've interviewed for Bond Park with Marshall. There's some great work being done in Waterloo region that isn't recognized or that could be amplified more. For instance, we interviewed Willow Gaudette, who is a member of the Sex Workers Action Network of Waterloo region, and I thought, or I think that could be something that not everybody is aware of and that not everyone knows is being done in Waterloo region to keep sex workers safe. That could be an interesting story to tell. But I think that I would like to just keep on telling honest stories about people who are experiencing joy on whatever level that might be for them, whether that's toys or pro wrestling or hip hop. Like, what is the next story that I might stumble across to bring the joy of their weekend activities or their collections or their passions to the audience?
Success in the filmmaking industry can be measured in many ways. Some measure it by how many awards they win, how much money they make. How would you describe your own success? How would you define that?
That's a good question. I mean, who doesn't like money, right?
Yeah.
We need it. I
Awards,
mean, yeah,
prestige.
Those things are all great. I mean, I've been honored by the awards that we've won from Bond Park and floored. Like, I had no idea that people cared as much as they did. Or do about Bond Park Podcast and by extension Bond Park Media, our filmmaking company. Of course, money would be nice because it does, unfortunately. I wouldn't care about money if not everything has a price tag.
Yes.
Our food, our shelter, our water, everything has a price tag. But for me, I really mean this. The success of filmmaking and being a creative in Waterloo region means being paid fairly for the work that we do. We need to support the arts as hard as we consume them during the pandemic. Everyone turned to art during the pandemic, watching, reading, creating, cooking. Those are all forms of creative expression, and everyone turned to that during the pandemic. And we have to remember that now we need to support the arts and not continue to cut funding from the arts.
Exactly.
And in Waterloo region specifically, that's a real problem right now, or has been an ongoing battle, but more and more gets cut every year. For me personally, the success of filmmaking will be to continue to tell these stories of joy for as long as I can, because why not?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why not spread this joy?
Why is filmmaking as a medium and storytelling in general, why is that so important to us culturally as a species?
Another great question, Bruce. Okay, so, previously, in years gone by, our storytelling was in pictures or in the written word or radio, perhaps, or the campfire chat, or around the kitchen table. And more people aren't doing any of those things, right? We are consuming most of our storytelling and our media through our phones, these magical tiny pocket computers that we all have every day. We're consuming our media in that form. So video is, I believe, for the next while,
the way to go.
The way to go. It is the way to. It is the clearest and most widely accessible medium for storytelling in our current world.
And the final question, Sarah, what advice do you have to give to other local filmmakers that are just up and coming?
That's such a good question. Do I say that with every question that you ask? You have good questions. You have really good questions. Advice for up and coming local filmmakers. Same thing that I told myself when I started with Playtime. Make the movie that you can with the tools that you have. So if that means going and making a film on your phone, go for it. Or if you have an old, Nikon Coolpix with, if you have an old digital camera with a movie function, go for it. If you can borrow, rent, buy perhaps equipment, go out and do that. But whatever you have, just get started. Because if you're waiting, if I were to wait for the right equipment, we wouldn't have Playtime. And I'm so proud of this film. I'm so excited to bring this story to people, and to bring Robbie's passion for taking care of one another. Off slaying scary monsters will return shortly. I love that. This story wouldn't be here if I hadn't, really forgiven myself that I don't have to be a big time professional. I can make the film that I can make with the tools that I already have. And if it had been my phone, I would have gone for it.
Spoken like a true professional, Sarah. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, hey, I wasn't expecting anybody. I'm just relaxing, lounging. Come on in. This is actually my very first action figure that I've ever had. I remember getting it at Byway with my mom. I cherish it. It's amazing how a little piece of plastic can hold so much value and sentiment and memory. It's a Rob De Silva action figure. It's pretty cool. Tattoos and everything.
From practically the day we are born, toys spark our imagination and teach us about the world. Toys become our companions and become a part of our self-identity. As we become grown-ups, we're expected to put away childish things, but toys are tangible connections to happy times, to birthday parties and family holidays and playdates with childhood friends. This is a story about the young at heart who understand the joys of toys. Nobody understands the joy of toys better than Robbie De Silva. Robbie runs a shop called 3D Vintage Toys Stuff and Things in Peddler's Village at the St. Jacobs Farmers Market in Waterloo, Ontario. Every day, Robbie meets customers who feel a deep personal connection to some peculiar item on his shelves. And on the best of days, the one elusive item someone has sought in a lifetime of collecting.
It's something that you can't put into words of how much of an influence he's been on me.
Now there's a guy that I'm always going to come back to because he's giving the time of day to my son and making him feel like there's no one else in the world focused in on him, and that's it.
He gets it. Like that's exactly it. He 100% gets it. I think because he's a collector himself, there's not a lot of people like that.
He understood what I was trying to do, what I'm trying to buy, and it was nice to share stories. His stories, my partner's stories.
He has found me so many wonderful things for my collection, and he knows with my spouse, birthdays and Christmases, sometimes he's connecting with him. He found me a strawberry shortcake, almost like a BMX type bike that had strawberry shortcake on the seat and on the wheels, and they orchestrated that. It was there under the tree, just like I was 8 years old again, came down, and there it was, waiting for me, not wrapped, just a bow on it.
I'm Robbie De Silva, owner of 3D Vintage Toys, Stuff and Things. The 3D stands for Darren, Desmond, and Daddy. That's the three of us. I am Daddy, and then my two sons, Darren and Desmond. I was born in 1979. Growing up, with a single mother, and I had two older brothers, and pop culture was very important to me. from Saturday morning cartoons to late night TGIF to seeing what's on the prime time and sitting around with your family watching sitcoms, which just doesn't happen today, you know? So I was very lucky in my childhood that I was connected to these things, you know, whether it was playing outside with my G.I. Joes and making little habitats for them, or reading my comic books in a fort that I made in my room just to escape and be in my own world. That was the greatest time for me, and I have such a connection to pop culture because that was made me who I am. That was my world, and I do what I do so I can keep a piece of that world with me.
My name is Luis Barrera. I'm of Latin American descent, and I would like to introduce you to my pony collection. So my first My Little Pony, I remember going to the store and seeing all these many different kind of My Little Ponies, and my mom said, okay, you can choose one, just pick one. So my very first My Little Pony was Peekaboo baby pony. This is not the original pony that I have with me, but I managed to buy it on box, on card, and I was so proud. When I found Peekaboo baby pony on eBay, I was so happy because I was searching and searching and searching, and I had a budget, and I saw this particular toy, and I was like, okay, it's affordable. I'm gonna get it. I'm not gonna wait. It's now or never. My specific memory with this pony was making a stable for it. So I would use popsicle sticks, and I would glue them and put the pony inside. Yeah. Hours of fun, yeah. My first memory of playing with toys, especially with My Little Ponies, was that I was at peace. I was having fun, and I was just being myself, and I was happy as a child. They brought me joy. They're very colorful, as you can see. My collection is specifically Generation 1 My Little Ponies. I want to be clear that I'm not a brony. I'm more interested in the vintage My Little Pony collection. People, when I show pictures of my collection, they're like, where are you? Are you at a toy store? I'm like, no, it's my collection. They're like, are you for real? I'm like, yes. I'm like, do you want to come to the house and see them in person? I'm like, yeah, for sure. And when they come here and they see it for the first time, they're like, oh my God, I used to have this. I used to have that. Wow. You're crazy, but wow.
A really important toy for me growing up was my Shira dolls. I loved My Little Pony. I loved Dinky Cars. I think it's funny saying that because I don't know if I'm dating myself. They're Hot Wheels Dinky Cars. But Shira was super important to me. I played for hours upon hours upon hours with her. But I think why she was so important to me is at the time, you know, Thundercats and Transformers were on TV, He-Man, even Hercules. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, but and then She-Ra came on, and I just remember looking at this female figure and thinking, oh my gosh, she's so cool. She's powerful. She's this kind of woman that I want to be. And so I was really drawn to her. Here's my She-Ra doll. I loved her so much. I couldn't part with her when I was little, and I carried the dolls with me through. How many times have I moved? 20 times maybe. I don't know. I pack them every single time and take them with me everywhere I go.
My name is Jacob Chikeen. I live in Ingersoll, Ontario. Been there all my life. I'm 22 years old, and I own a antique and collectible store run out of my place of residence in Ingersoll, fully online, called Chikeen Collectibles. Deal with all sorts of vintage toys, various antiques, all the good stuff that everybody loves. Well, I think I grew up in, it almost feels like the last generation where we really used our imagination playing with stuff. I always cherish those memories, right? So it's fun to see every generation also have that with what I'm doing now. Everybody wants their childhood toys back. A lot of people think that they're just kind of, you know, hunks of plastic, but they're a lot more than that, right? It's a full memory. It's a full childhood. It's, you know, everybody has memories down to Saturday mornings with their toys, right? And they never go away.
My name is Dave Chikeen, and I am Jacob Chikeen's father of Chikeen Collectibles. My earliest recollection of toys was receiving at Christmas time Best of the West and Johnny West, and I'll never forget that. It was a great time for me. The simplicity of it, when it comes to toys, that's what's most important for me. It's bringing you back to a very simpler time. It's about the passion of it.
All right, well, my name's Drew Hendricks, and really big Ghostbusters fan. Been that way since I was a small child. So my first memory of the toy aspect of Ghostbusters comes from garage sales. My parents did a lot of garage sales. It's pretty much what we do on a Saturday morning is drive around and hit all the ones that were in the classified section. Yeah, it's I don't necessarily go around and boast about it. Sometimes I get, people are like, "Oh, you collect toys." I kind of do. Yeah, I kind of have a room in a house, Some people have, expensive cars. I have a room with shelves and a wallpaper that makes it look exactly like the firehouse from Ghostbusters. My wife was gracious enough to allow me that to kind of take over a room and set it up because I haven't had that since I was a kid. Pretty much, I've been moving. It's been in boxes and everything. So I get a lot of like, okay, and they don't get it. And 9 times out of 10, we get talking about it, and I think I can speak passionately enough about the subject that they start to understand after a few minutes and are like, okay, well that's cool. And then honestly, I really loved Power Rangers when I was a kid. I wonder if my parents still have those Power Rangers toys. And then, I'll talk to them in a few weeks and now they're on eBay buying a Megazord. You know what I mean? It's like I think it kind of triggers some emotions in them too.
What was on my mind when I was thinking about playing and what it has meant to me was the idea of daydreaming and softness, and that's been a real theme in my life. So these are my stuffed animals from when I was a baby. This one in particular, my mom got at my baby shower. It's an elephant. It has lasted the test of time somehow. I got this Care Bear as well, and I brought it. And my dad gave this to me, so it's just very special to me. I've had it for a very, very long time. So this is my favorite bear. This is Snuggy. I've had him since I was 7. And I remember it like when we were little, we didn't have like a ton of money, and I wanted this really expensive bear from this department store in the States when we were traveling. And I'm pretty sure my parents were like, no, come over here and buy this bear from the bin. And so I got Snuggy on this trip in Chicago. And Snuggy has basically stayed with me as my like special stuffy. I would sleep with Snuggy even through like high school. Can I admit this? Like university, I took Snuggy to university with me. Snuggy's missing an eye. There's the missing eye because of one of our pets back in the day decided to take Snuggy's eye. So poor Snuggy. Took one for the team.
My name is Courtney McMaster, and I collect 80s toys, especially E.T. and Strawberry Shortcake. I can remember from as early as possible, my mom always made sure I had the It toy. I was never without because she was a single mom. So I remember having Cabbage Patch Kids and dolls. Just even if I had a good dentist appointment, I got a new doll to play with. And E.T., once I saw that, there was no replacing E.T. I carried him everywhere with me, on trips, to school. I was never without my E.T. doll. I wanted to be Drew Barrymore as well in the E.T. movie. Like, we were around the same age, and I still, to this day, I used to think that I was her sister or something. Like, I thought we were the same, and we were at the same height, her and I. Like, I just wanted to hug him. Like, I don't know, and I wanted to dress him up like she, like, I think that I would have been her in that movie. I don't know, it's hard to explain other than that. It was just like a pet almost. As much as I love all my cats, it's not quite the same. So I just have to turn them on the bottom.
Greetings, gentle earthling. E.T., glad you're back.
And then it's like he's asleep, and then after a while he'll just light back up.
E.T., phone home.
And he says different things, but he just kind of goes off on his own sometimes.
E.T. lives far away. Green planet.
So growing up in the 80s, one of my favorite things was window shopping, or better known as looking through the catalogs of the Sears or the Bay or Consumers Distributing catalogs. And that was our window shopping back in the 80s. So I would sit on my Ford under the stairs, lined by Star Wars sheets on my walls and sitting in there with just enough light from the light bright to shine in the catalog so I could circle the things that I wanted to buy or the hopes of owning them one day. One of those pieces was a Road Pig G.I. Joe. I didn't have a lot of G.I. Joes, but for some reason this figure just stood out. And I circled it, and I was adamant that I was going to save my money and my allowance, and I was going to get one of these. So I believe it was the summer of 1988, and I had to save up. And it felt like forever, felt like an unattainable goal. And I had to wait for my older brother to walk me over to the store one day because I wasn't old enough to walk over by myself. I finally got it. I finally saved up enough money and allowance and ended up getting them over at Zeller's, I believe it was. And this is one of my favorite figures that I have from my childhood, Road Pig from the G.I. Joe 1988. And it's very special to me because it taught me patience. It taught me perseverance. It taught me work. I had to work for it. This guy's just funky. He's cool. His haircut's awesome. He's got a tattoo. And I don't want to blame him for my tattoos, but there's quite a possibility that he influenced me a little bit. Him and maybe Bam Bam Bigelow.
Toy shows are a labor of love and a community unto themselves. Everyone seems to know each other and be on the lookout for the best items for their loyal customers. And maybe their own personal collections.
So exciting to be able to go back out and to see everybody again, because you do start to recognize people when you go to the same shows and see them antique places, just to see really cool things that you totally forgot about from your childhood, still out there and still making other people happy.
Do you have any surprises for me today?
You know what? I don't think I have anything, but there's a lot of really cool stuff around here. I noticed tons of strawberries.
You've already scoped everyone out?
There's huts, you don't know the huts.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Eric might have to build an addition for your addition.
Yeah, when I go to the toy shows, I do as I'm driving there, I want to be there early. I don't want somebody else to scoop that item that I don't have yet up first. When I go, I'm looking for strawberry shortcake. I'm looking for ET. But I'm also excited, maybe there's something I don't even know that I want. So I do know I have to slow down and really look and dig through bins, because who knows what I might find. But for the most part, I get really anxious. What if I'm missing it? What if I'm taking too much time here and that booth 3 booths down has what I want? So it's a struggle back and forth. Okay, live in this moment, take this time to look for things, but hurry up.
I've been collecting for probably 20 years. So what I'm selling is my personal collection. A lot of this is just excess stuff that I'm downsizing. I love collecting because I've been a child at heart my whole life. I've always had Barbies, I've always had dolls, and it just brings out the child in me. So I'd purchased the Happy Home Strawberry Shortcake House a few years ago, probably about 7 years now. In my collection, it was like the holy grail for me. Always wanted to collect it, and a young lady named Courtney walked by. She has a beautiful collection of strawberry shortcake stuff, and she was really excited to find it, and I was really excited to have it for her and give it to her, and she purchased it, and I hope it's going to live on through someone else. So once was my collection, now it's someone else's to enjoy. Toys have always brought me joy ever since I can remember. It's always been my happy place. I have a toy room of my own that I have vintage Barbies pre-1973, and I do have some Monster High, and I do have some vintage 80s stuff left. He-Man, She-Ra, all those things that I remember playing with. And when I see them, it brings me joy. I love to display them, and I enjoy toys. It just brings back the inner child, and I love it.
I kind of forgot what it was like to, say, go to a toy show or a store or something and just be in a booth or, a place in the market that has so much stuff that you get overwhelmed. You kind of want to make sure you're looking at it all. You're not missing anything, but you're also rushing because there's a little bit of fear. Maybe somebody's behind you looking for the same thing, right? I'd really forgotten what that was like. And it was fun to get back out doing that again once the lockdown ended. One thing with the whole toy community that I came to discover was Instagram. got, I signed up for an account shortly before the reboot came out in 2016. I just found this incredible community of like-minded individuals. And they're always telling you, well, you should check this place out. You should check this place out. And one of the places a friend told me about was Rob's shop. I saw he put up a post with some toys, some Ghostbuster stuff in there, and that was kind of my introduction to him, is going in there and essentially rating what he had just purchased off somebody and picking out what I really needed. Yeah. So right around that time that he started posting some Ghostbuster stuff, I was working in Toronto, and I knew that I needed to get in there and get it fast, otherwise somebody was going to snap it up. So one of the items he had was the car from the second movie, and obviously being a big Ghostbusters 2 guy, that's what I really wanted when I was a kid. So funny enough, a lot of vendors have a way of reading through your poker face when you go into their store. So they won't put prices on the items. They'll kind of pull a number out of the hat or gauge your reaction and base the price off of that. So knowing this, I sent my wife in there because I knew if I went in there and saw it, game over. I would have completely freaked out. It's something that I'd been chasing for a really long time. And so I sent her in there and I'm like, okay, Lauren's my wife's name. You have to play this completely cool. You can't jerk, you can't do anything, get excited, because these guys know that. And again, I didn't know Rob, and Rob's very much not that type of person at all. So he's one of the better ones out there. And it's something I've come to appreciate about him, obviously. But so I sent her out there and I'm like, okay, take pictures and I'm gonna tell you which one to get, but make it look like you're not taking pictures because we don't want him to find out. And so she did, and eventually she ended up with this, which is the Ecto 1A from Ghostbusters 2. And it's something that I wanted a lot when I was a kid. So much so that I had a couple of the original cars. And here's another one. I tried to make it myself. So I've got, I wrote call the number on the side, and that's literally like a sticky note that's been taped on. I spelled where wrong because I was a child. So I still have this, but I didn't have the actual toy. So when I saw it pop up on Rob's shop, I knew I had to send her in to go and get it. And then obviously this is it. So excited that I took it out of the box. I had to put the decals on it, which didn't stick anymore, but I couldn't do reproduction decals because it wouldn't be the real thing. So here it is. This is the grail of my collection, realistically. And I've got Rob to thank for that.
When I tell people what I do, it's a very mixed reaction, because when I tell people at a toy show per se what I do, they totally get it. They say, yep, this is some great stock. Totally makes sense that you need to do it full time. There's a lot of work here. Whereas if I tell some of my friends my age, they're a little, oh, really? They don't fully understand it. What if you look for a real job? It's certainly something that I've heard before.
The anticipation of not only the day before, but it's actually after the last toy show ends. You're prepping for the next toy show to come up. So the preparation, the anticipation of everything, filling the van, going, do you think we have enough? No, I think we can bring a little bit more, And then once you get there and you finally see that end result, you have everything out on the table. The lineup outside is 3 rows deep of people just willing and able. They just want to come in and see what's out there. The best part of the toy show is looking at my son's expression on his face and looking at me and go, well, Dad, this is it. Here we go. It's a joyous occasion for me.
I just want to make sure I get the right name because they have a specific name. So this is Mimic Generation 1, and she's really sought after. So on eBay, she's going for $300 up. I purchased her for $150 4 years ago. Yeah. Mimic is rare. If you don't have Mimic in your collection, you're not a collector. On a searching day, out in the wild, they call it, during the weekends, we go to thrift stores. And I'm always excited to see if I could find a pony that I've been looking for. And when I do, I'm ecstatic. I'm happy because I'm like, yes, I now I have this pony now that I've been looking for years or for months, So So this pony is My Pretty Pony, and My Pretty Pony is the mother of mothers. Like, she is the pony that started all this collection. And I was so psyched when I saw her from afar. Her blue little eyes were like sparkling, and they were like just looking at me from afar. I was like, "Is this it?" I saw her at Value Village, and I was like, "It can't be." And I went closer to the shelf, and I was like, "Yes, it's her." I looked at the price, and it was $3.99, I believe. But on eBay, she's going for like $50 a pop. I was so excited.
By night, Robbie works as an overnight counselor at a home for at-risk youth. His own journey to mental wellness is a source of wisdom that provides patience and support for these kids, but it is also a job that requires a lot of emotional energy.
I grew up without my real father, but when I was about 13, my stepfather came into my life, Pat, and right off the bat, we had a huge connection. We connected with classic rock music, and he taught me a lot about things that I never really experienced. We would go to flea markets and garage sales and then start going to toy shows, and it was amazing. Some days we would go to 2-3 places one day, and we were just traveling around the back roads, hanging out, bonding, and it was really good memories. So things weren't always easy. There was always ups and downs, bumps in the roads. For the most part of my child's life, I was a single parent, raising them and doing the best I can. Around 2016, things were kind of really low. I was in a deep depression. I was on disability from work. I had a neck injury, kind of sitting around and wondering, what am I doing with my life? I have all these ideas. I have these talents. I have all the support around me telling me I should do more and I should, take advantage of my skills and my talents. And depression just didn't allow me to do that. I think breaking the cycle is very important, and it's easier said than done. It's hard. I see that at work. I see that in my own life. I guess you're wondering what my shirt means. I know you read it. I've been talking for a while. Off slaying scary monsters. Rope returns shortly. This means so much to me. My youngest son, Desmond, was working with me, and he would, help out, which is a great help, his part of 3D. And he made a sign that he would put on the desk on our counter for when he would take a quick break. And he's living in Alberta now. And one day I was just sitting there looking at it, and I just was thinking about him and missing him. And I said, you know what? That's an amazing metaphor. A metaphor for mental health, for the battle that we go through every day.
Meet Robbie's sons Darren and Desmond De Silva, the other two Ds in 3D Vintage. Both grew up helping their dad at the shop.
My dad's just that creative person. Like, he just, I don't know, he's always doing something and creating something. I've never not seen him chase a project, him accomplish everything he's ever wanted.
So the kids get this little bag. It's kind of neat. It's mysterious. And they open it up, and inside is their little monster.
And doing that collecting and hobby just kind of helps distract him from like the harsh realities of his day job. It's the work my dad does is appreciated by a lot of people. It's kind of like he's my dad, so like, I don't see it and like experience it, but the impact that he's had on a lot of people and just our community in general is admirable and inspiring.
Hello, my name is Darren. I'm son of Rob De Silva. I would say 3D Vintage is a good thing for my dad because a lot he does with his actual job can be a little depressing sometimes and really weigh down on you. I'd say mostly for maybe his mental health, it gets him out and, conversing and talking with people, meeting new people, making new friends, and just new experiences in general. I think it's really helped him.
My earliest memory of Ghostbusters is my parents got this VCR, and my dad was really excited. He was recording absolutely everything at the time, and CTV did a broadcast of Ghostbusters 2 on, I want to say it was sometime around 1992 or 91. And of course, he recorded it off of TV, and I got to watch that one, and I was really really drawn to the way it looked visually. The effects were incredible. The story was incredible. Oddly enough, the pink slime really got me. And I watched that like on nonstop for probably a good 3 weeks. And oddly enough, my dad worked in an auto body shop, and he got a bag full of rags one time. And this was in and around that same time. And in that bag of rags was actually the shirt that I'm wearing right here. With me and Ghostbusters, I think it's just one of those things that grabbed me at such a young and impressionable age. And not to get all sappy about it or anything, but you watch, you know, shows, you talk to other people who collect certain things, and they all come from a standpoint of that's what they did before things kind of took a turn in their life. And you know, obviously things happen, and you get older, and you have to deal with things a different way. But when you're a kid and you have this kind of blind innocence that you're not cognizant of what's going on around you. So I was really into Ghostbusters when I was a child, and my parents ended up getting a divorce, and that's what happens, and that's fair. But for whatever reason, I link Ghostbusters back to that happy period before the divorce, and before I had to necessarily accept the fact that, you know, things happen that you can't always control. So for me, it's very much a comfort level. I go and I put these movies on, and it takes me back to that feeling that I had when I was a kid before, and again, not to get all sappy, but before the world turned, so to speak. And so I will always have that feeling with these movies, with the franchise in general. It always invoked that same feeling within me. And I think that's why I always stay with it, and I can't really get tired of it, because at any given time, doesn't matter how bad of a day, week, month, year I'm having, I can just throw these movies on, and I escape. Or, you know, I go and buy a toy, or you know, interact with somebody from the community. It's a full-on escape from, you know, I guess the rigors of being an adult, so to speak. It just takes me back to being a child.
These customized ponies are special to me because they represent pride. I remember growing up with the typical Batman, Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joes, typical male toys that you were expected to play with as a male child. When I had My Little Ponies, I would bring them to school, and I was picked on. My first grade teacher spoke to my mother and said, "I feel it's best that your son doesn't bring a My Little Pony toy with him to school because he's picked on." So my mother was not very supportive of me having My Little Ponies. When I did have a My Little Pony, she would tell me to cut the mane of the hair and just leave the tail, because she wasn't happy me combing the hair or braiding the hair. She felt it was too feminine. So at this point in my life, growing up and finding myself and buying things that interest me and making me happy, I said, why not? I said, they don't do anything to no one. It's just my collection. I'm in my own tranquil area. I'm at peace.
So, yeah, Shira was such an extremely important, powerful female character for me because there weren't many at the time on TV, in the toy stores, in the girls' aisle. It was mostly Barbie, My Little Pony. I mean, they're great toys. I love them. But Shira was really differentiating in that she was such a powerful figure. And that, I think, is really important because I would tend to want to go into the boy aisle. I loved Thundercats. I loved Transformers. So sometimes I would get my mom to take me into the boys aisle because they had some cool action figures. And Shira was the only one that I could find in the girls aisle that was a powerful female figure for me. And I find that's really important because now that I have a son, that experience as a child stuck with me. And when I brought my son to the toy store when he was little, I remember going through the aisles, and the girls' aisle was pink and the boys' aisle was blue, and it had guns and trucks, and the girls' aisle had bracelets and makeup and Barbies. And I just thought, man, okay, there really hasn't been an instance where we're making things a little bit more non-gender specific. And so I encouraged my son to shop in the girls' aisles. The store was his store. There was no dividing between male, female for me. So we would go through the aisles, and he ended up picking out little Furbies and what is typically seen as girl toys. We had a kitchen set and things like that that, you know, were really kind of gender specific. And he enjoyed playing with those toys. He had dolls. He had toys that are considered female toys. So I think that's important to make sure that you're taking your child through the toy store and not differentiating between the genders. I think girls and boys want to play with the toys that they want to play with, and not necessarily ones that are just made for male, female.
So learn how to play, let things go, let go of some of the conditioning that we've learned, and get back to that stage of childhood and adolescence where you can just do stuff for the fun of it. We need that in our world right now more than ever.
I have young boys come in and they're buying My Little Ponies, which would be considered a brony. And then I have young girls come in and they're looking for monster trucks and Godzillas and monsters. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And I really do see these families that come into the shop, and it's almost like a therapy. I gave the kids a reason to wake up in the morning. How many parents tell me, oh, thank you for being here. I got my teenager out of bed because they knew they could come here and probably get a wrestler or an action figure or see what new stuff you got. So I love that I brought some families together in the last 6 years, and they've made it traditions. I see the same families every Saturday, every Thursday. I've seen kids from the womb, and now they're walking and handing me pictures of their favorite Transformers. It's pretty cool how I've been a fixture in these families' lives. I'm the toy guy. And there's Rob. They all know me, the crazy-haired toy guy. I love that feeling. So I know when people come in there, they're transported, almost like a portal, another dimension. And it's hard to describe, but it works. They come in and they just transfixed in their eyes, and they're just looking at everything. And it brings up all these memories that they forgot, things that they forgot for a reason, some things they forgot just because they forgot. So it's reconnecting with those things, seeing that Cabbage Patch doll that you totally forgot about, but now you remember how happy you were when you opened it up in 1984. Or that wrestling figure that you got from your birthday, or, you know, just one of those things. And it just sparks that memory that you filed away long ago, and you walk in and it's just like, hey, remember me? Let's talk. It's kind of that feeling. It's like running into an old friend. Really is.
I think that there's, you know, very few cases where you could say, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to pursue selling toys full time when you're 22. You know, both my parents gave me that support. I would not be here without them. And I'm living the dream quite truly, being able to do this full time, you know, go across Ontario, picks, finding these incredible collectibles. But it was the motivation to do it. Yes, you can do this, Jacob. Go for it. Why can't you? You know? And that was the biggest thing. And that's what I kind of want to tell people with your kids. They'll know if something isn't working, right? If you give them the support, it's just going to motivate them further. You want your kids to be in something that they're passionate about. And that's what my dad realized with me.
I love it. I can't wait to retire and be able to work for Jacob full-time for free and go picking. Trying to find something that someone else really wants, and it's going to make them happy. I always found that going out with Jacob on picks, whether it's garage selling, going to a market, antique market, or to a show, is being able to find that one thing that someone else is going to love and bring them to a happy place of where I'm at. One of the things that I tried to instill with Jacob is listen to the people that have it. Listen to what they're telling you. It's a history lesson. That brings memories to them. So this toy has now had years of memories with one individual, is exchanging hands, and hopefully it brings years of memories to someone else.
To me, my toys mean happiness. When I come into this room, I forget about my worries, and I just get to sit down and just be wowed about the accomplishment that I just did. And I never thought I was going to have this collection, to be honest.
You know, maybe sometimes you give something away to a kid for free because it puts so much joy on their face, a big smile.
I think we're all trying to recreate our childhood in some form or another. You know, be it with our own children, we're trying to pass down what we loved when we were kids, or you know, just trying to find that happy place. And I think I've inspired more than a few people to kind of dig into that themselves.
Nope, I don't have children, and I won't have anyone to pass this on to. I wonder what will happen to them later. Will anybody even know what strawberry shortcake is in hopefully 40 more years when it's not my collection anymore? Where will it go from there? And it's scary to me that somebody may not know what an ET is or a strawberry shortcake is at that point in time. But I really do hope it does live on in somebody else's collection at some point, but not yet.
I remember when I was a little boy tearing open a large orange Garfield stuffy on Christmas morning. The joy I felt as I squeezed him in my arms is still tangible to me to this day. I had night terrors, and as I would fall asleep, nervous about the monsters that would visit me in my dreams, I remember scratching at Garfield's big plastic eyes, knowing that it would all be okay. We could all use some of that comfort in our grown-up lives. Playtime may be about collecting, but it is also about remembering that time before our innocence was lost. Being a kid should be a big part of being a grown-up.
Big, bright world.